Welcome to the very first episode of Aiden's Punk Rock Reading Corner. This week we have the classic 1001 Tales of the Arabian Nights. Well, not really all of them because, well, that's a lot. No point in dallying, let's jump right into it. The 1001 Tales starts with King Shahryar, who, having been cheated on, takes the only logical course of action and decides to execute his wife and her lover. And then every day finds himself a new virgin wife, deflowers her, and then has her executed at dawn the next morning and starts over. Perfectly logical conclusion. This is all going fine and dandy until King Shahryar decides that the next woman in line should be Scheherazade, the vizier's daughter. Well, shit, what's she gonna do now? Well, Scheherazade is not afraid. She's a clever girl, and she has a plan to fool King Shahryar. She asks her sister, I don't remember her sister's name, we'll call her Daisy. She asks her sister Daisy, hey, tonight, come to the palace after the deflowering, but before the execution, and ask me to tell one of my famous stories. And she's like, Scheherazade, you don't have any famous stories. And she's like, it doesn't matter, come to the palace and do what I say. And Daisy's like, well, okay, you're my sister and I trust you, so okay, I will. So Daisy does what she's told, and she comes to the palace later that night, and she's like, Scheherazade, tell me one of your famous stories. And she's like, well, okay, I will. And so she starts telling this really long story that goes on for fucking ever, and just keeps going and going and going and going and going until the sun comes up. And she ends it on a cliffhanger and tells King Shahryar, oh well, too bad I'm gonna die, it looks like you won't get to hear the end of the story. And King Shahryar is like, well, okay, I guess I can let you live one more day just so I can hear the end. And this is where my first problem comes in, because it's like, you'd think that would work, maybe once or twice, but Scheherazade manages to get this shit to work for 1001 days. According to the legend anyway, it probably wasn't anywhere nearly that long, because, that's almost like 3 fucking years. Or wait, no, that is like 3 fucking years. There's no way she would keep that shit up that long. Otherwise, he must be like some huge fucking retard or something. It's a monarchy, so there's lots and lots of inbreeding, so that's probably very likely. It's kind of an improbable premise anyway, but that's basically how the whole thing goes. And at the very end, after 1001 days or 3 years or whatever, however long this goes on, King Shahryar is like, well, Scheherazade, you are very wise and very hot, so I think I will keep you as my wife as long as you don't cheat on me, so I don't have to do this all over again, because this took a lot of time and energy. And she's like, okay, that works for me. The end. Understandably, both for my laziness and your convenience or busy schedule, I'm not going to tell 1001 Tales, not that there's 1001 Tales in my copy anyway. I'm only going to tell you a few of my favorite stories, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. This first one is entitled The Fisherman and the Genie. There's a fisherman. He has a wife and 3 kids. He only eats what he catches, and he's broke as fuck. And for some reason, he only chooses to cast his nets into the water 4 times a day. Maybe it's for religious reasons, that's never really explained. So, he's cast his net 3 times, he's pulled up nothing. And he's starting to get a little desperate. But last time, the 4th time he throws it in, he pulls up this badass brass kettle. But it's sealed with wax around the end. But it also feels really heavy. So he's like, can't be seawater. I wonder what's in it. I hope it's really valuable. And so, he pulls out his fisherman's knife and he shivs that shit open. And holy shit! Of all this smoke, and there's a genie in there. What the fuck? And so the genie goes on this tirade about how he was put in there by the king of the genies, and how for the first 1,000 years he was like, I'll give all the money in the world to whoever lets me out. In the second 1,000 years, I'll make king whoever lets me out. And for the third 1,000 years, I'll give even more money and make king to whoever lets me out. And then he started getting bitter, and so it's like for the 4,000 years, it was like, I will kill whoever sets me free because I'm so angsty. And the fisherman's like, well, I have a last request. You see, you're so massive, and I don't understand how you could fit in such a tiny brass kettle. And the genie, who I guess is really gullible, is like, well, I'll show you just how I fit in there. So he goes back in there, and all of a sudden the fisherman slams that shit shut on him. And the genie's like, well, hey, bro, you know about that whole killing you thing? Don't worry about it. I will make you rich beyond your wildest dreams if you just let me out again. And the fisherman's like, well, genie, I can't trust you because I know the story of the physician and the Greek emperor. And the genie's like, well, what's that? What's the story of the physician and the Greek emperor? And the fisherman's like, well, you don't know the story? Well, I'll tell you. Long time ago, in a galaxy far away, there was a Greek emperor who had leprosy, and there was this world-famous physician traveling through his kingdom, and he said, don't worry, Emperor, I can fix that right up with my magical polo stick. And so he does. And then the Greek emperor is greatly indebted to the physician and says, I will make you the most esteemed member of my court, and I will give you lots of money and all the harems you could possibly desire. And the physician's like, well, that sounds pretty sweet. The Greek emperor's extremely incompetent vizier grows insanely jealous. Those should be my harems, he tells himself. Those should be my piles of money I'm swimming in. So he decides to have the physician killed. The vizier is like, Emperor, this physician is actually secretly an assassin sent to kill you. And the emperor's like, that's fucking retarded. He just saved my life. He could have just let me die if he wanted. And besides, I wouldn't trust you anyway because I know the story of the husband and the parrot. And the vizier is like, well, what's the story of the husband and the parrot? I don't know the story of the husband and the parrot. And the Greek emperor is like, well, vizier, I will tell you the story of the husband and the parrot. Once upon a time, there was this guy who bought a parrot for his wife. and shortly after that had to go on a long business trip. So he was like, honey, keep this in your room, make sure nothing bad happens to it. And she's like, okay, honey, I will. And then, while he's gone, she cheats on him, and the parrot sees it. This parrot has the ability to recall and talk about what it saw. So when the man comes back, he talks to the parrot, and the parrot is like, your wife totally cheated on you. And he's like, oh no, what tragedy. But before he confronts his wife with this, he decides that he will test the parrot again to make sure it's actually telling the truth. Little does he know that his wife is overhearing the whole thing. So the saucy bitch goes to her slaves and she says, slaves, I need you to pour a bucket of water over the cage and bang it all night long. And so the slaves are like, that sounds kind of dumb, but okay. So they do it. And then the next day, the husband comes to the bird and says, well, what did you see last night? And the bird is like, well, I couldn't figure out a damn thing through the horrible storm. And the man knows damn well there wasn't a storm last night. And so, disgusted with himself for even trusting the parrot to begin with, grabs the bird and throws it to the ground so hard that it dies. Then one of the slaves, feeling insanely guilty, snitches on the wife and tells the whole story to her husband. And then the husband feels like a dick. The end. And then going Inception style back into the story of the physician and the Greek emperor, the vizier is like, oh well, Greek emperor, that's an excellent story, but clearly you've never heard the story of the vizier who was punished. And the emperor's like, well, vizier, I've never heard the story of the vizier who was punished, so why don't you tell me the story of the vizier who was punished? And the vizier is like, all right, I will tell you the story of the vizier who was punished. Once upon a time, there was this prince who wanted to go out hunting, and he was like, daddy, daddy, I want to go out hunting. And so the king was like, well, son, you should take the vizier with you. He'll keep an eye on you and junk. And so the prince is like, okay, and the vizier goes out with him, but I guess the vizier gets lost or, goes bird watching or something, because the prince rides off and almost gets seduced by this lady who turns out to be an ogress and tries to eat his ass, and he runs home to his dad and is like, dad, this vizier sucks ass, let's kill him. And the king is like, yes, son, that's a good idea. And then they kill him by strangling him a lot till he dies. The end. And so then, going back up again to the story of the physician and the Greek emperor is like, well, vizier, you've actually sold me on the idea. I don't know, maybe it was the opposite day. Whatever. So, the physician is given a day to get his affairs in order before he's executed. And so he does. He gets all his medical journals together and, all his worldly knowledge and blah, blah, blah. So he goes to the king the next day and is like, King, there is something I've never told anyone. It is perhaps the greatest thing I've ever found in my travels of the world. Here in this book is instructions on how you can talk to my head after you cut it off. And the emperor's like, holy shit, no way, this is going to be the greatest weekend ever. And so, the physician is executed and his head is put in a bowl. And so out of the book, the emperor reads some magical blah 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 lines off of it, and suddenly the head's eyes open and the mouth starts talking. It's like, hey emperor, what's up? And so the emperor's like, oh, this is pretty sweet. Now what do I do, head? And the head is like, alright, go to page 6 of the book and you can see what you need to do next. But all the pages are stuck together. So the emperor starts licking his finger and turning the pages and turning the pages and licking his finger and turning the pages, and then he gets to page 6 and he's like, this page is blank. What the fuck, head? And then the head is like, oh, I totally got it. You see, Emperor, I stuck the pages together with poison, and since you were gonna be a dick and kill me, I decided I should be a dick back. And then the Emperor, oh, he dies, and then the head is like, and then the head dies, and the end. And so now we're back to the fisherman and the goddamn genie. And so the fisherman is like, and this genie is why I do not trust you. And so the genie's like, well, you think that's something? Boy, do I have a story for you. And then he decides to skip the story and just tell the fisherman how to get rich instead, because I guess they were really, really goddamn tired of all these tangents. Sweet Jesus, I'm getting tired of him. The story goes on for like another 20 pages about how the fisherman gets rich, and then there's these 4 different kinds of fish, and there's this Indian bitch who keeps breaking into this kitchen to steal the fish, and it's like, then there's this palace that's all by the side of a lake, and it's made out of black marble and shit, and then the prince is like also made out of black marble and shit, because he got cursed by his ex-wife who turned out to be a sorceress or something, and she's sleeping with his slave who's like comatose or some shit. This could go on for a long time, but I'm gonna be a nice person and cut it off right before 10 minutes. I hope you weren't expecting to, get this far and get a moral of the story or whatever, because you're not really gonna get a lot of morals out of me. I'm mostly in this just because I think this is really funny. Yeah, that's the moral of the story. Don't waste your time if it isn't funny. No one gets out of life alive, so, what's the point in taking anything seriously? So,
Hey, guys. Whoa, big gulps, huh? All right. Well, see you later.